Alright guys, so here we have our 2025 Gasgas 450 Factory Edition, and we're going to do a little build series where we're going to throw a turbocharger on this, because I wrote a Stark Varg and I didn't like how much I liked it. So we have to make something right now that's going to beat the Stark Varg. So we made our way over to the messy shop, and now we're starting to tear the bike down. I got both the plastics off on both sides. And what we're trying to do now is just get this exhaust off and then throw it in the trash. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all pulled off, and we can start getting the exhaust off, getting the engine out. We'll start pulling the gas tank and all of those things. And while it's apart right now, I'm starting to plan out the cold side of the turbo, and I actually have the turbo right over here. So here I have the turbo, and we're also starting to plan out where we exactly want this to be. I'm thinking something like that, routed down in place of the exhaust, somewhere around this region. But we still have some work to do. I might clock this a little bit differently. We still have to figure out the oil feed and return for this turbocharger as well. But those are kind of small details, afterthoughts. So yeah, we're going to tear it apart more and get to it. Now is going to come the fun part. Everything's already off right now. I just got the engine mounts off. I'm going to try to do this top end job with the engine in the frame. But if we can't, we're going to end up pulling everything and going about it that way. But I'd rather not pull the engine if we don't have to. With the studs going into it, that might present a trick, but we're going to see what happens. I'm not too worried about it. We're just going to take it step by step and see where we end up. Camshaft is now out of the engine. I want to go ahead and start pulling the head off. It's just these 4 bolts to get the head off. I have the rocker arms out of it. This engine's really easy to work on. What my plan is to actually raise the cylinder and head by putting multiple base gaskets in. I have a brand new head gasket, several OEM base gaskets, so we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to stiffen up these intake valve springs right here by putting in some custom spacers that I'm going to make. And we're also going to put in engine studs rather than these engine bolts. I have ARP engine studs. So those are the 3 main upgrades I'm going to do to this right now. We're also going to gap the piston ring, and that's actually all we're going to do to this engine. We're also going to beef up the clutch a little bit down the line, but for right now, in terms of tearing it apart, that's what we have in store. The head is now off the bike, so I went ahead and got everything off. You can see that this bike has been run. They do test the bikes at the KTM factory. I never ran this bike. I couldn't run it if I wanted to. It's actually currently locked right now. So the head is off. Head looks pretty good. The valves are massive on this. I've never pulled the 2025s apart. I pulled apart a 500 2024 at the KTM Gasgas school, but these valves are gigantic. I mean, they barely fit in the head. The fit and finish is really good on everything. Now we're going to get the cylinder off, see how many base gaskets we want to use, and see what our ring gap's going to be too. We're going to file the rings down, get everything tip-top shape, start getting her back together. Now that the cylinder's off, what I'm doing right here is measuring the ring gap. And what I found out taking this all apart is I initially thought that it was a 2-ring setup, like a normal automotive piston where it has 2 compression rings, but unfortunately this only has 1 compression ring. So that means that I'm not going to go too crazy with gap in the ring. Now the gap right now for this top ring, I just measured it out and we're at 12 thousandths for that gap right there. And what I'm going to do is aim for about 14 thousandths on the ring gap. We don't want to go too crazy because, like I said, it is a single ring. So if we go too crazy on that single ring gap, what's going to happen is all the combustion chamber pressure is just going to leak out of that 1 ring gap, and that second ring isn't there to, catch some of the gas as well. So what we're going to do now is file that down in my ring filer and throw it back on the piston. Here I got my ring. And I got my Jegs ring filer right here. So what I'm going to do is just file one side of the ring. You only want to file one side of your ring and stay congruent. And what you want to do is just, you only want to file it one way as well. You don't want to file the ring back and forth because you can risk chipping it if you do that, and also if you file it in the wrong direction. So what I'm going to do now is get my ring lined up. and I'm just slowly going to work it towards me. Alright, so I just gave it 10 passes, and what I'm going to do is you also want to take a small file and file off these sharp edges, because on the grinder right here it made this a very sharp edge. So what I'm going to do is just file off every single edge, and then we're going to throw it back in the bore and see what our gap is after that. Onto the head now. What we're doing is we're putting a spacer underneath this bottom retainer on the valve spring. Now this side I already did, and you can see that the bottom retainer is sticking up above the aluminum casting compared to this other side, if we can get in there, where the retainer is sitting a lot lower and down in. So we're going to repeat what we did to this valve right here over to this valve, and essentially increase the spring pressure by more PSI than we are adding boost to the engine. The shim is in. You can see there's a small washer underneath the bottom retainer. I'm going to go ahead and get the springs, retainers, valve back in, get this head all together. Once the head's done, I'm going to start prepping gaskets, spray all my gaskets down, and we're ready to assemble. I'll get the studs in, spray the gaskets with some of this, and start the fun part. With the APE studs on and the 3 base gaskets, it's really starting to look like something that can hold 100 horsepower. This bike comes with a factory JE forged piston, but we went ahead and gapped the rings like I mentioned earlier. Studs are in. I put red Loctite in with into the cases. I'm just going to use oil on this top section here where the bolt goes. Hardest part's done. Now time to just push everything down. Now we get to see the main reason why we pulled this engine apart in the first place. So with our 3 base gaskets down there, we can see our pistons down in the hole about 30 thousandths more than it was before. The piston was level with the deck when we pulled everything apart, and we can see that it sits about 30 thousandths into the hole now. The piston's at its highest position now that we look at it. So we can see this is going to give us, it's going to ruin our naturally aspirated squish band, but this is going to be good for turbocharging. This is going to lower our compression to about 11:1, which is a lot better than the 14:1 compression that it comes with out of the box. This is looking mighty fine now. Now that's starting to look like an engine. Looking at these studs, they're actually a little bit too long. You can see that the threads end before the top of the cylinder here. And even though I have some thick washers to go under, I'm lucky that I did put the 3 base gaskets underneath this cylinder, because I think that these studs wouldn't have worked otherwise. They just would have been too long, period, at that point. But I have thick washers that gives me good thread engagement, and the nuts won't bottom out with these as well. So get the head torqued down and call it a night here. Finish up in the morning. Quite a bit of skipping around, but ended up getting the camshaft back in, cammed all time correctly, retorqued the head gasket. You can see we ended up with 3 base gaskets on the bottom right here. Now with the 3 base gaskets, I didn't realize how tight my cam chain was going to be. I took that into consideration, and that's why I didn't go any higher, but I was surprised how tight it was with just 2 base gaskets additional to the one that was in it from the factory. So it has 3 total right now. Now you can see I don't even have the cam chain tensioner in it, but if I go to move this with my finger, the chain's pretty damn tight already. So this is about the max we could raise our cylinders without getting a longer cam chain. Time for the final mod. Let's modify the oil system. Now on to the last mod we're going to do to this engine. So on the bottom side of the engine, at an angle, there's this oil pressure relief valve right here, which is essentially just this ball, this spring, and this plug. Now, this ball and spring fights your oil pressure. So as soon as it hits a certain PSI, it starts leaking out of this ball and returning back into your engine. So what I'm going to do is upgrade to this larger spring right here, which I found from an Everbuilt assortment from Home Depot. And you can see it's just slightly taller, maybe 2 millimeters taller, and a thicker coil as well. So this should get probably 25% more output, which is going to be necessary because now I'm going to be supplying a turbo, and it'd be good to have higher oil pressure anyway with this setup. So I'm going to get this installed and the engine will be done. Alright guys, it's been a long 2 days, but we finally have the bike completely finished. It's been a long road. You can see we got the studs, several base gaskets in there. All the mods are done. The bike is all back together, all in a weekend's work. I'm glad to have it done. Sorry if we jumped around a bit, but if you guys want to see more content like this, please subscribe. Obviously, we have more parts coming. This is just part 1 where we're doing the engine, and then next weekend, we're going to start designing the turbo kit and getting that pumped out. And then the following weekend, we're going to start tuning and getting that out. So if you guys want to see the rest of the build series, please like, please subscribe. And there's more builds like this coming this way.